Greetings and salutations. Today we will be covering the unsolved disappearance and mysterious death of Jaryd Atadero. On October 2nd, 1999, 3-year-old Jaryd Atadero, his 6-year-old sister Jocelyn, along with 11 adults, were hiking the Big South Trail near the Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. While hiking, Jaryd ran ahead, and it was estimated that he only ran up to 100 feet, then stopped to talk with what is assumed to be some fishermen. Following this, Jaryd would continue down the trail ahead of the group. Unfortunately, this would be the last time anyone would ever see Jaryd. In the following days, a massive search and rescue effort would fail to turn up any evidence or even clues. In 2003, hikers Rob Osbourne and Gareth were in the Purdue Canyon area near the Big South Trail and came across remains arranged in a rather strange manner, some ways above the trail. The discovery remained puzzling and controversial due to these remains being that of the young boy, and it has left people with some rather pertinent questions. Was it an animal attack? Was it foul play? Or maybe something else? It is important to note that the Big South Trail is an 11-mile long trail located at 8,440 feet within the Roosevelt National Forest. Eventually, it does cross into the Rocky Mountain National Park, which is a 723,000 acreage or 1,131 square mile forest. Said forest was established on July 1st, 1908 by then President Theodore Roosevelt. This forest was originally part of the Medicine Bow Forest Reserve and was first named the Colorado National Forest in 1910. Then it would eventually be renamed by President Herbert Hoover to honor President Theodore Roosevelt in 1932. It is important to understand the area is around the Pawnee National Grasslands, which was transferred to the Forest Service from the Soil Conservation Service in 1954. This would denote it as a national grassland in 1960, meaning it is within the jurisdiction of the National Park Services. In October 1999, Jaryd Atadero was staying with his 2 children, Jaryd and Jocelyn, at the Purdue River Resort, which was a commercial resort owned by him and his twin. During their stay, Jaryd and Jocelyn would express a desire to visit the fish hatchery, along with some members of a Christian singles network group who were staying at the resort. Initially, their father was rather hesitant. However, he would eventually consent to the trip, trusting the group would keep to their word when they stated that they would only be visiting the hatchery. On the day of the excursion, the group of 11 members, including Jocelyn and Jaryd, decided to take an early afternoon hike up the Big South Trail, breaking their word, which was located just 15 miles west of the resort. While it is unclear as to why particularly the group made their decision, the father of the missing boy noted that it might have been because of the beautiful warm weather, due to him going as far as to describe it as one of those gorgeous fall bluebird days in the mountains of Colorado. Reports about this event, which occurred on the trail leading up to the boy's disappearance, varies drastically. However, it is generally accepted that the group split into a faster and slower paced subgroups on the trail, with Jaryd reportedly running ahead of the group he was paired with. At some point, he stopped to chat with 2 fishermen who were unaware that he was not related to anyone of the Christian Singles network group, which they had seen further down the trail. Sadly, the last time anyone would see Jaryd would be by the fisherman when he was walking rapidly up the trail near the adjacent campsites. Despite the extensive search efforts, Jaryd would not be found until several years later, when his remains would be discovered by hikers in the area. Unfortunately, the circumstances surrounding his disappearance are stated to be rather unclear. However, his disappearance did gather a significant amount of attention and debate, especially amongst law enforcement officials and the public at large. At some point during the hike, the members of the Christian Singles Network group heard a loud scream. This group included Jaryd's sister, Jocelyn. They would all become rather alarmed after hearing the scream. According to Jocelyn, the scream sounded like someone was either being attacked or playing a prank. This caused them to go and attempt to find Jaryd. Unfortunately, he had been considered out of sight of the group, which quickly became a consideration of him having gone missing. They would eventually return to the resort and inform Jaryd's father of the disappearance. He was notably distraught, which is rather understandable when your young child disappears. It is noted and referenced that he was so emotionally overwhelmed that he began to beat his chest, screaming, bellowing out repeatedly, "They lost my baby. They lost my baby." The resort manager would go on to call the county sheriff's office, who would organize a search and rescue team, which were quickly deployed to aid in the search for Jaryd. These team members included the recently retired undersheriff Bill Nelson, who would remain optimistic that they would likely find Jaryd rather quickly. However, after ceaseless hours of searching, Nelson would go to his vehicle in order to take a quick nap, telling the staff to wake him up when the boy was found. When he awoke the next morning, he noted that he was still parked in the front seat of the truck, which caused him to be rather concerned that Jaryd had not been found. Despite the extensive search efforts and an exhaustive search by the search and rescue team, Jaryd had remained missing for an extended period of time. This caused many to start to lose hope, leaving his family and loved ones with deep anguish, and all those involved in the search efforts to feel a rather strong sense of dread. The search would continue and cause a large sense of urgency and a need to explore every potential avenue to find the boy. Regardless of how difficult the circumstances were, the team was fully dedicated to locating Jaryd and bringing him back safely. The search for Jaryd was extensive, but it must be noted that it was plagued with a litany of challenges, which hindered or halted its progress on multiple occasions. One of these major obstacles was the ravenous media frenzy which surrounded the case, which created distractions, along with diverting large amounts of resources and time from the search and rescue team's efforts. Additionally, the helicopter that was being used by the search and rescue team would wind up crashing suddenly, resulting in several injuries to the team on board. This helicopter was a Huey UH-1N helicopter provided by the E.F. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, which had been selected to search and flew to the Fort Collins Loveland Municipal Airport to refuel. However, upon returning, the helicopter would end up struggling with its fuel due to the mountain conditions and ultimately stalled out, crashing 100 feet up the Big South Trail. The helicopter was specifically carrying 4 members of the Air Force as well, who were there to aid in the search, as well as Mark Sheets, a Loveland resident, a member of a search and rescue team which was intent on aiding in the effort. Sheets had not been originally scheduled to join the flight. However, he had taken over for his manager, George Jansen, and he would be accompanying the crew on the ground search. During the flights, Sheets states he heard the co-pilot express difficulty maintaining altitude, and then heard a message indicating that they were going to crash. During this, he attempted to shut the door. However, despite his efforts, a severed tree limb would come crashing through and hit the Air Force doctor on board, fracturing the doctor's eye socket. The helicopter then, in essence, would disintegrate, its fuselage splitting into 3 separate sections as it crashed. The Air Force crew was able to escape the wreckage. However, Sheets was trapped. He had suffered several injuries, including a concussion, a 13-inch gash on one of his legs that would leave his femur exposed. He also had broken 3 vertebrae in his lower back, and his shoulder had also been broken. However, despite his physical injuries, Sheets was also emotionally distraught due to not being able to help in the search for Jaryd, and in part believing himself to be drawing away resources and hindering the search. Sheets would retire in 2017, noting that the crash was a reminder of the difficulties faced by those engaging in search and rescue operations. During the search for Jaryd, media sensationalism would latch itself onto the case, with scores of TV trucks, newspaper reporters, amongst others, drawing comparisons to the then high-profile John Benet Ramsey case. Laramie County Sheriff Justin Smith, who was at the time a sergeant, recalled the intense emotions of everyone involved, saying, "From moment one, that second day, we quickly realized what we were up against. The search for Jaryd involved searchers, combing riverbanks, steep slopes, and other difficult trails. Dive teams would go peering into pools left within slow-moving rivers. They also included a plane making constant passes overhead. Unfortunately, all this would be for naught due to them being unable to locate the young child. Amidst the search, the situation would become overwhelmingly emotional for everyone, due to multiple searchers being constantly brought out on stretchers, along with the Air Force coordinating the site of the crash, essentially making that area unsearchable. At one point, there were 17 TV and satellite trucks lined up on Colorado Highway 14 with anchors in fur coats, constantly walking around. This caused many people to call for more information, including individuals who claimed to be psychics, who stated they knew where Jaryd could be found. Despite the efforts of the search team, and even the involvement of the psychics, along with a barefoot man with a donkey, and someone stated to be an American Indian who would perform a ritual asking the mountain to give up the boy, no trace of Jaryd would be found. The case would eventually become a cold case, which would leave Jaryd's family and his father with a complete lack of closure and a sense of dread constantly looming over the family. His father stated, "I was critical of them because when you are in a survival situation, you want everything you can to be done. At times, I thought there was much more they could have done." In essence, the search for Jaryd was highly emotional and wrought with misfortune, and the media involvements, along with the psychics, did not help. Now, many years later, in 2003, Rob Osbourne and Gareth Watts, two businessmen, would be out hiking in Pordure Canyon near the Big South Trail. It would be then that they would stumble upon human remains. The remains included a polar fleece sweater, along with a pair of blue trousers, and the white Disney Tarzan sneakers that Jaryd had been wearing when he disappeared. Upon notifying the authorities of this, further searching revealed a human molar, along with a large fragment of a fractured skull. Initial DNA testing indicated that the remains were highly likely Jaryd's, and then with even more DNA testing, which came later, it was proven that these remains were 100% in fact those of the young boy. However, rather than cremate or bury the boy, his father made the decision to keep them, creating a shrine to his son within his old bedroom, which he had kept exactly how it was prior to his son's disappearance, with the skull fragment carefully placed atop Jaryd's favorite toys and belongings. According to the boy's father, he would state, "I'm at peace. I know I'm going to see Jaryd again one of these days. I'm going to look at him and say, 'Jaryd, what happened?' He's going to look at me and say, 'Dad, does it really matter?'" The shaken man would publish a book titled Missing: The Jaryd Atadero Story. A father turns tragedy into hope after the 1999 disappearance of his son in the Colorado mountains. Within the book, he discusses his motivation for keeping the piece of Jaryd's skull, as well as his religious beliefs and how they aided him in the decisions he would make surrounding how best to handle the remains and memorialize his son. His reaction to the tragic event does highlight how complex emotions and psychological issues can affect families after such a tragedy, and it must be noted that not everyone will react the same way at the loss of a loved one, where some may choose to bury or cremate the remains as a means of providing closure. Others may choose to keep the remains and memorialize them as a way to keep a connection to a loved one once lost. But it is clear that how the father handled his son's remains was his way of coping and reaching some form of closure. Now onto the theories and controversies surrounding the death. The death of Jaryd Atadero remains a mystery. However, there have been two main theories which have cropped up around the case. The first one being a mountain lion or other animal attack, along with the theory that the young boy was abducted and then disposed of. Despite the general consensus that Jaryd was killed and eaten by a large animal, the contention around this theory remains somewhat vigorous. According to experts on big cats in Colorado, a mountain lion would have attacked the boy's stomach first, aiming for his internal organs. However, Jaryd's sweater showed no signs of such an attack. This, along with the fact that the boy's trousers were turned inside out, which would be in no way possible for a mountain lion to do. Furthermore, his Tarzan sneakers showed minimal signs of wear, along with no signs of them being dragged. These factors would point to a mountain lion not being the culprit. There's also the possibility that it could have been a larger animal, such as a bear, or even a human. And with the human, it is where the second main theory comes up. This theory purports that Jaryd was abducted and then slain by somebody who had been intent on capturing him, then disposed of the boy's clothing. This is due to the only damage on the trousers coming from rodents and birds yanking away at large pieces of fabric in order to weave them into nests. And from this theory, it must be noted that although family and friends were questioned, there were no indications that anybody, at least anybody immediately known to the family, could have taken Jaryd or had been seen obsessing over the boy. Another very important thing to note was that at one point in time, a man had been claiming to be Jaryd and harassing the family. However, his claims would come to be shown as false with the discovery of the remains, and the DNA match would invalidate his statements. Jaryd's father claimed that the man incessantly stated that he was Jaryd himself and would not leave the grieving father alone. It would be to the point that Jaryd's father would take out a restraining order on the individual, and when the order was actively violated, the man was arrested. The authorities believed the man was not connected in the disappearance, but was just a mentally ill individual who was seeking some sort of aid or attention by latching on to the case. As of now, the case remains officially unsolved and is classified as a cold case. Regardless of this, efforts by law enforcement and volunteers would continue to some extent even to this day, even though no concrete evidence has surfaced to determine what was the cause of death and what caused Jaryd's disappearance. However, further analysis and investigation into this tragic incident may breathe new life into the case. This shows us that despite a massive search and rescue operation and extensive media coverage, a disappearance can remain a cold case for decades. And even though his partial remains were found by two hikers in 2003, the case stands out due to a lack of resolution and strangeness surrounding the case. The disappearance of Jaryd Atadero serves as a haunting reminder of how tragedies can occur, along with the importance of staying vigilant while exploring nature. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.